I was in a Marriott in Columbus, Ohio, reviewing a lease agreement for a strip mall acquisition, which is what I do for a living, by the way, so remember that detail when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The room was the kind of clean that only hotels manage. Tight corners on the sheets. A Bible in the drawer nobody opens. My laptop was on the desk next to a cup of lobby coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the Clinton administration, and I was comparing the square footage of a retail space in Hilliard to the asking price per foot when the buzz came through. One short vibration. Text message. I didn't look right away. I had 3 pages left on the lease and a conference call at 8 the next morning, and my mother's texts were usually one of 4 categories. A recipe she saw on Facebook, a prayer chain she wanted me to join, a photo of something Brooke did, or a complaint about the neighbors. None of those required urgency. I finished the page, took a sip of the coffee. Then I picked up the phone. Sold Mom's shop today. Got a great price. Brooke is so happy with her new car. Don't be dramatic. It was just an old store. I read it once, then again. The words didn't rearrange themselves the second time. My thumb hovered over the screen. The coffee was still warm in my other hand. I could hear the ice machine humming through the wall, the low rattle of it filling a bucket nobody had asked for. A car door shut in the parking lot 3 floors down. Normal sounds, the kind of sounds that keep going when your chest locks up and your brain starts running numbers it didn't ask to run. 42,000. That's what a 1,200 square foot retail unit goes for in that part of Gastonia, if the buyer isn't using a broker and the seller is in a hurry. I knew this because I evaluate commercial properties 5 days a week. I knew the tax-assessed value. I knew the zoning. I knew the square footage down to the half-foot because I'd walked it with a measuring tape when I was 15, and Grandma asked me to help rearrange the cutting tables. And I knew because I had filed the paperwork myself on a quiet Tuesday in February when the Gaston County Courthouse was nearly empty, and the clerk asked me if I wanted a receipt that the property at 2847 Garrison Road did not belong to my parents. It belonged to me. I set the phone on the nightstand, screen down. Took another sip of the coffee slowly, the way you do when your hands need a job that isn't shaking. Then I opened my laptop, closed the lease agreement, and pulled up a PDF I hadn't looked at in 8 months. A quitclaim deed. Recorded. Stamped. Filed with the county register. My name in the grantee line. Clear as a title search with no liens. I forwarded it to one email address. A man named David Chen, an attorney whose name I'd pulled from the notarized sale documents, which I'd found in under 4 minutes through the county's online property records. Because that's what I do. I find things in paperwork that other people didn't think anyone would look for. The email was 3 sentences. No greeting. No sign-off. I am the legal owner of the property at 2847 Garrison Road, Gastonia, NC. Attached is the recorded quitclaim deed, dated February 14th. Please advise your client accordingly. I hit send, closed the laptop, brushed my teeth, set my alarm for 6. 46 hours later, my father couldn't hold a glass of water without spilling it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Rachel Mitchell. I'm 30 years old. I work as a commercial property analyst for a mid-size real estate firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is about 30 minutes from the town I grew up in but feels like a different planet. I drive a Subaru with 94,000 miles on it. I have a 2-bedroom apartment in the Noda neighborhood that I keep clean enough to think in. And on my desk at work, next to the monitor and a mug that says World's Most Adequate Employee, which I bought for myself, because who else would? There's a pincushion, shaped like a tomato. It's red fabric, a little faded, with 4 pins still stuck in the top. My coworkers think it's quirky, a conversation piece. They don't know it's the most expensive thing I own. My grandmother made it. And the shop my parents just sold, the one my mother called just an old store, is where she made it. Where she made everything, including me. In my family, a text message isn't a text message. It's a verdict delivered without a trial. And my mother had just handed down a sentence she didn't have the authority to give, for a crime I hadn't committed, using money that wasn't hers to spend. To understand why one text about an old alteration shop in a strip mall could unravel 20 years of family pretense, you need to know what that shop was. And more importantly, who gave it to me, and why. Margaret Owens, my grandmother's best friend, said something at the funeral 3 years ago. She took my hand in the parking lot of the church and said, "Your grandmother spent her whole life giving to people who never once asked how she was doing. Don't you make that same mistake, honey." I thought it was just funeral talk. I was wrong. Dot's Alterations sat in a strip mall on Garrison Road in Gastonia, North Carolina, between a laundromat called Spin City and a nail salon that changed names every 18 months but always smelled the same. 1,200 square feet. Cinder block walls painted cream in 1994 and never touched again. A plate glass window with gold vinyl lettering that read Dot's Alterations Hems, Repairs, Custom Work, and below that, in smaller letters, my grandmother added herself with a Sharpie, and good conversation. She ran that shop for 32 years. My grandmother was 5'2" on a good day, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain she made herself, and had hands that could hem a wedding dress in 40 minutes. Her name was Dorothy Mitchell, but everyone in Gastonia called her Dot not because of the shop, but because she'd been Dot since she was 6 years old and told her kindergarten teacher that Dorothy was too many syllables for a Tuesday morning. The teacher laughed. The name stuck. 68 years later, the minister used it at her funeral and nobody thought twice. The shop smelled like fabric, starch, and peppermint. Always. Even in August when the AC unit in the window was losing its war against North Carolina humidity, and the laundromat next door was pumping drier heat through the shared wall. Starch and peppermint. She kept a jar of butterscotch candies by the register, not for the customers, though they were welcome to them. For me, I spent every Saturday in that shop from the time I was 8 until I was 14. Not because Grandma needed help, though I pretended that was the reason. Because my parents were busy. Busy is a word that covers a lot of ground in my family. Busy meant Brooke had a gymnastics meet in Raleigh. Busy meant Brooke's recital needed both parents in the front row. Busy meant Brooke's birthday party required all hands on deck. And mine required a card from the drugstore signed by whoever remembered last. My parents weren't cruel about it. That's what makes it hard to explain. They weren't locking me in a closet or calling me names. They were just facing a different direction. Always. Like sunflowers that had picked their sun, and I happened to be standing in the shade. Grandma Dot was the only person who turned around. The Saturday I remember most, the one that lives in my chest like a stone I can't cough up, I was 12. I'd won 3rd place in the county science fair. Soil erosion project. I built a model with 3 different ground covers and a watering can and measured runoff in graduated cylinders over 6 weeks. 3rd place out of 141 entries. My teacher, Mrs. Perkins, called it rigorous. I was 12 and didn't know what that meant, but I knew it was good because she said it twice. The award ceremony was on a Thursday evening at the community center. My parents said they'd come. They didn't. Brooke had a recital. A dance recital. Not a competition, a recital. The kind where every kid gets a participation ribbon and the parents clap regardless. But both of them went. Both. And I stood on a low stage in front of a room full of other people's families and accepted my ribbon from a judge who shook my hand and said, "Your parents must be proud." I smiled and said, "They are." Grandma Dot picked me up afterward. She didn't ask why I was standing alone in the parking lot. She just opened the passenger door of her Buick and said, "Get in, we're going to the shop." It was 8:30 at night. The strip mall was dark except for the laundromat, which never closed. She turned on the lights in the shop, those long fluorescent tubes that took a second to flicker on, buzzing like tired bees, and she walked me to the back wall where she kept photos. Her mother, her first sewing machine, a picture of the shop the day it opened in 1991. She took my ribbon, 3rd place, County Science Fair, soil erosion, and she taped it to the wall right next to the photo of her mother. Then she looked at me. Glasses on the chain. Butterscotch in the jar. "They don't come because they don't know how to love what they can't use," she said. "But I see you, Rachel. I see you," I cried. Not the loud kind. The kind that doesn't make a sound because if you open your mouth, the whole thing breaks open and you're not sure it'll close again. She handed me a butterscotch candy and said, "Don't cry over people who don't cry over you. Save your tears for something worth watering." Grandma Dot died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast, the kind that gives you a diagnosis and a timeline in the same sentence. 6 weeks from the doctor's office to the funeral home. She spent 4 of those weeks at the shop, working. Hemming pants, fixing zippers, as if stopping would give the cancer permission to go faster. The will was simple. A lawyer in Gastonia read it in a conference room that smelled like carpet cleaner. The house Grandma's little brick rancher on Elm Street went to my mother Connie. Her only child. Fair enough, the shop went to me. The specific language was, to my granddaughter Rachel Ann Mitchell, who was the only one who ever sat with me on Saturdays. My father shifted in his chair when the lawyer read that line. My mother stared at the table. Brooke was on her phone. And I sat there holding a copy of the will with both hands, reading that sentence over and over, because it was the last thing my grandmother would ever say to me, and she had chosen those words with the same precision she used to cut fabric measure twice, cut once, waste nothing. My parents wanted to sell everything and split the proceeds. "What's Rachel going to do with an alteration shop?" my father said, right there in the conference room, as if I weren't sitting 6 feet away. "She lives in Charlotte. It's just going to sit there." It did sit there. For 3 years, I paid the property tax $1,100 a year and kept the lights on and drove down from Charlotte once a month to check the locks and stand inside for a few minutes. I didn't sew anything. I didn't rent it out. I just kept it. And 8 months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, Valentine's Day, as it happened, because the courthouse was quiet and I had the afternoon off, I filed a quitclaim deed transferring the property fully into my name. Not because I suspected anything. Because I evaluate commercial property for a living, and cleaning up estate paperwork is something I do for clients every single week. Professional habit, nothing more. Have you ever owned something that was worth more than its price tag? Something that if someone took it, they wouldn't just be taking a thing, they'd be taking proof that somebody once loved you? That's what Dot's Alterations was. Not a 1,200 square foot retail unit in a tired strip mall, not a line item on a tax return, not just an old store. It was a Saturday night with the fluorescent lights buzzing, a butterscotch candy, a ribbon on the wall, and a woman who turned around when nobody else did. So when my mother texted me that they'd sold it while I was 400 miles away reviewing someone else's lease agreement and spent every penny on a BMW for the daughter, who never once set foot in that shop, she wasn't just telling me about a real estate transaction. She was telling me one more time that I didn't matter. But this time she'd put it in writing. And writing, as it turns out, is my specialty. I didn't sleep that night in Columbus, not because I was upset, or not only because I was upset, but because my brain had shifted into the same gear it uses when I'm pulling title history on a property with a clouded chain of ownership. It's a particular kind of focus. Clinical. Sequential. You don't feel things in that gear. You find things. I made 3 phone calls before 9 the next morning. The first was to the Gaston County Register of Deeds office. I got voicemail they don't open until 8:30, and I called at 7:12, but I didn't need a human. I needed the automated system to confirm the recording number on my quitclaim deed, which it did. Recorded, indexed, active. The property at 2847 Garrison Road, Gastonia, North Carolina, was legally owned by Rachel Ann Mitchell. Not Gary Mitchell, not Connie Mitchell, not the estate of Dorothy Mitchell. Me. I already knew this, but in my line of work, you confirm what you know before you act on it. Assumptions get people sued. The second call was to Margaret Owens. Maggie picked up on the first ring, which she always does, because she's 72 years old and believes that a ringing phone might be an emergency and she'd rather be wrong than late. "Maggie, it's Rachel." "Oh, honey, I was wondering when you'd call." She already knew. She'd seen it happen. My father had come by the strip mall the previous Tuesday with a man in a pickup truck. They walked the property, measured the storefront, took photos. Maggie watched from her kitchen window. She lives in a duplex 3 doors down from the strip mall and has a direct line of sight to the parking lot. A fact she has never once been subtle about. "I thought you knew," Maggie said. "I thought maybe you'd given them permission. But then your mother posted on Facebook about Brooke's new car and I thought, that doesn't smell right." "It doesn't smell right because it isn't," I said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to do what I do, Maggie. Paperwork." She laughed. It was the first warm thing I'd heard since that text message. The third call was to the Strip Mall Management Company, a small outfit called Triad Property Group that handles about 40 retail units across Gaston County. I told the office manager I was the owner of the unit at 2847 Garrison Road, and asked for any documents related to recent lease activity or sale transactions. She hesitated. "We received a transfer notification last week from a Mr. Gary Mitchell. He provided a signed purchase agreement for the unit. Buyer is a Kevin Draper. Purchase price was $42,000. Closing was handled through a notary, not an attorney." I wrote that down. Kevin Draper. $42,000. Notary, not an attorney. "Fast and dirty," I said, mostly to myself. "Excuse me?" "Nothing. Can you email me copies of the transfer notification and the purchase agreement?" She could. She did. I had them in my inbox within 20 minutes. Here's what my parents didn't understand, what they couldn't have understood. Because they've never had to think about it. When you sell a piece of real property in North Carolina, ownership doesn't transfer through a handshake and a check. It transfers through a deed. A recorded deed filed with the county register, signed by the person who actually holds title. Gary Mitchell did not hold title. Gary Mitchell had not held title for 8 months. What Gary Mitchell had done was sell a building he did not own to a man who paid $42,000 in cash and trusted a handshake in a parking lot. In North Carolina, that's called obtaining property by false pretenses. General Statute 14-100. It's a Class H felony. I didn't have to look that up. It came to me the way a surgeon knows where the aorta is. Not because she's thinking about it, but because it's the kind of thing you carry when your entire career is built on knowing who owns what. My father had committed a felony, and he'd done it to buy my sister a car. I sat in that hotel room with the purchase agreement on my screen and the coffee long cold, and I thought about calling home. I thought about picking up the phone and dialing my mother's number and saying, "What were you thinking?" I thought about the sound my father's voice would make when I told him what I knew. The stammer, the justification, the pivot to blame. Your grandmother would have wanted. He'd say that. He always starts with what dead people would have wanted, as if dying made them agree with him. I thought about all of it. The conversation, the tears, the yelling, the part where my mother says, "Family helps family," and my father says, "Let's not blow this out of proportion," and Brooke texts, "Why is everyone fighting from the other room?" And then I didn't call, not because I was too angry, because I'd been through that cycle before the confrontation, the tears, the temporary guilt, the slow slide back to exactly the same dynamic, and I was done auditing a property that was never going to appreciate in value. Some investments, you cut your losses. Some, you realize the loss was always the plan. Instead, I emailed David Chen. I'd already found his name the night before. He was the attorney whose contact information appeared on the notarized sale documents representing the buyer. 4 minutes on the county's online records portal. Deeds, liens, transfer documents, they're all public if you know where to look. Most people don't. I do it before breakfast. The email was 3 sentences. No greeting, no sign-off, no emotional language. Just the facts. The way you'd write to opposing counsel on a Tuesday afternoon when the title search came back wrong. I am the legal owner of the property at 2847 Garrison Road, Gastonia, NC. Attached is the recorded quitclaim deed, dated February 14th. Please advise your client accordingly. I attached the PDF, hit send, closed the laptop. Then I booked an early flight back to Charlotte. Not to Gastonia, not to my parents' house. To Charlotte, to my apartment. To my own space where the furniture stays where I put it and nobody rearranges my life without asking. My mother's text had arrived at 6:47 the night before. My email to David Chen went out at 8:23 the next morning. 13 hours and 36 minutes. In that window, my parents probably slept fine, probably watched TV. My father probably sat in his recliner and felt good about himself, the patriarch who'd handled a piece of family business, cleaned up an old loose end, made his youngest daughter happy. He didn't know yet that the loose end had a title search, a recording number, and a woman on the other end who reads deeds the way other people read novels. By the time I landed in Charlotte the next morning, David Chen had already called my parents. I know this because my father left me a voicemail at 7:42 a.m., he said, and I'm quoting Rachel, "What the hell did you do?" His voice was shaking. I saved the voicemail. Not because I needed it as evidence, because it was the first time in 30 years my father had sounded like he knew I existed. And isn't that something that the only way to get Gary Mitchell's attention was to cost him $42,000? My mother once told me I was too cold and too much like a robot. She said it at Thanksgiving, 3 years ago, in front of Brooke and Tyler, and a sweet potato casserole that nobody complimented her on. She meant it as a criticism. She was about to find out exactly how useful a robot can be. I drove to Gastonia on Saturday morning. Not to my parents' house. To the shop. The strip mall looked the same way it always did, tired but standing. Spin City was running a weekend special on comforters. The nail salon had a new name again, something with an orchid in the logo. 2 cars in the parking lot. A pigeon walking along the curb like it had somewhere important to be. I parked in front of Dot's Alterations and sat in my Subaru for a full minute before getting out. The gold vinyl lettering was still on the window. Dot's Alterations hems. Repairs. Custom work. The Sharpie part underneath "and good conversation" had faded to almost nothing. You could only read it if you already knew what it said. The key still worked. That surprised me, though it shouldn't have. Kevin Draper hadn't had time to change the locks before the sale collapsed. The door stuck the way it always did. You had to lift and push. At the same time, a trick Grandma taught me when I was 9, back when the door was taller than I was. Inside, the shop was empty. Not the kind of empty where things are missing, the kind where the absence has a sound. Kevin Draper had started clearing it out before David Chen's phone call put everything on hold. The sewing machines were gone, both of them, the industrial singer and the little brother that Grandma used for delicate work. The cutting table was gone. The rack of thread spools that covered the entire back wall, organized by color in a way that made the wall look like a sunset, gone. The jar of butterscotch candies, the reading lamp with the crooked shade, the calendar from the Gastonia Lions Club that Grandma never updated past March because she said the picture of the kitten was too good to turn the page on, all of it, gone. The fluorescent lights still worked. They flickered on the same way they always had, buzzing and hesitant, like they needed a moment to remember what they were for. And on the back wall, taped at eye level next to a faded rectangle where Grandma's photo of her mother used to hang, was my science fair ribbon. 3rd place, County Science Fair, soil erosion. The tape had yellowed. The ribbon was curling at the edges. But it was still there. The one thing nobody had thought to take because nobody else knew it mattered. I stood in the middle of that empty room for a long time, longer than made sense. The sunlight came through the plate glass window and landed on the concrete floor in a long, warm stripe, and dust moved through it the way dust does, slow, indifferent, going nowhere. I had the key in my hand. Grandma's key. I'd carried it on my keychain since the funeral, next to my car key and the fob for my apartment building. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the teeth, the small rough edge where the brass had worn down from 32 years of a woman who opened her shop every morning at 7:15 and locked it every evening at 6 days a week, because consistency was the only religion she practiced. And standing there, in that empty 1,200 square foot box that smelled like dust and the ghost of fabric starch, I understood something I hadn't wanted to understand. I wasn't fighting for this shop because of Grandma. Grandma was gone. She'd been gone for 3 years. She wasn't in the fluorescent lights or the concrete floor or the faded ribbon on the wall. She was in the ground at Westover Memorial, plot 47, row C. I knew the number because of course I did, and no amount of property tax payments or monthly visits or quitclaim deeds was going to bring her back. I was fighting for this shop because if I lost it, I had to accept something I'd been refusing to accept my entire life. That my parents were never going to change, that they were never going to turn around, that I could win every science fair in the county, graduate with honors, build a career, pay my own bills, and they would still drive to Brooke's recital. Every single time. The shop was the last place where that truth didn't apply, the last room in the world where someone had chosen me first. And as long as I had it, I could pretend the rest didn't hurt as much as it did. I pulled the ribbon off the wall, carefully, so the tape didn't tear it, folded it once, then twice, and put it in my jacket pocket. Then I heard Grandma's voice. Not the sentimental version people trot out at funerals, the wise grandmother with soft hands and gentle wisdom. The real Dot. The one who told a kindergarten teacher that her name had too many syllables. The one who opened a business with $800 and a borrowed sewing machine, and kept it running for 3 decades through sheer stubbornness. Don't cry over people who don't cry over you. And I thought, when was the last time either of my parents cried over me? When was the last time either of them lost sleep over something that hurt me? When was the last time my name came up in their house and the sentence didn't end with a request? I locked the door, put the key back on my ring, walked to my car. Done grieving. My phone had 14 missed calls, 9 from Dad, 3 from Mom, 2 from Brooke. I didn't listen to all the voicemails, I listened to enough. Dad went through his whole range in 90 minutes. First, the reasonable patriarch. Rachel, let's talk about this like adults. Then the offended authority. You are tearing this family apart over a building. Then the guilt play. Your mother is crying, Rachel. Are you happy now? 3 acts of Gary Mitchell performed in the key of a man who has never once been told no by someone who meant it. Mom's voicemail was one long sentence disguised as concern. Rachel, honey, I don't understand why you're being so dramatic. We are a family. and family shares, and Grandma would have wanted Brooke to have something nice, and I really think if we all just sat down together. I stopped it there. I'd heard that speech before. Different words, same melody. Brooke's message was the shortest and, honestly, the only one that sounded human. Rach, what's going on? Dad is losing it. Can you just call? I don't understand what happened. I didn't call anyone back. Instead, I opened the family group chat the one mom had named Mitchell Family Love with a heart emoji and typed one message. I will be available to discuss this matter through my attorney. Any further communication about the property at 2847 Garrison Road should be directed to the Gaston County Register of Deeds, where the current ownership is on public record. My father responded in 11 seconds. I know because I watched the 3 dots appear before I'd even put the phone down. Attorney? We're your parents, Rachel, not some client. 30 seconds later. What attorney? Do you actually have an attorney? 1 minute after that. Your mother wants to know if you're coming to Sunday dinner. 3 texts. Outrage, fear, and casserole. The entire Mitchell family emotional spectrum in under 2 minutes. I put the phone in the center console and drove back to Charlotte with the windows down, even though it was October, and the air had that thin, sharp edge to it. That means the season is turning, whether you're ready or not. The highway smelled like pine and exhaust and something I couldn't name. Something that felt like the first breath after holding it too long. I wasn't sure if it was freedom. I'd never actually felt it before. But the road was open, and the sky was getting dark, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I wasn't driving toward anyone. I was just driving. What would you have done? Called them back? Given them a chance to explain? Or would you have done what I did, which was absolutely nothing, and let the silence do the talking? Monday morning, 9:14 a.m. I was at my desk in Charlotte, pulling comps on a warehouse conversion in Mooresville, when my office phone rang. Not my cell. My office line. The one clients use. Miss Mitchell, this is David Chen. I'm an attorney with Palmer & Associates in Gastonia. I represent Kevin Draper. His voice had that particular flatness lawyers use when they're trying very hard not to sound frustrated. I recognized it because I work with attorneys every week and I've learned to read them the way other people read weather, not by what they say, but by the pressure behind it. Mr. Chen, I've been expecting your call. I imagine you have. A pause. My client purchased the property at 2847 Garrison Road in good faith for $42,000. He paid cash. He received what he believed was a valid purchase agreement signed by Gary Mitchell, who represented himself as the owner. Gary Mitchell is not the owner. No, he is not, which is why I'm calling. Chen explained the situation from Draper's side. Kevin Draper owned a small printing business cards, banners, promotional materials. He'd been looking to expand into a storefront with retail visibility, and the strip mall on Garrison Road was in his price range. Gary Mitchell approached him through a mutual contact at the Gastonia Rotary Club. The deal was done in 11 days. Cash, notary. No title search, no attorney review on the seller's side. My client is a trusting man, Chen said. Perhaps too trusting. Your client paid $42,000 for a property without running a title search, I said. In my industry, we call that optimistic. A short sound on the other end. Almost a laugh. Miss Mitchell, my client wants his money back. The Mitchells, your parents, appear to have already spent it. On a vehicle, I'm told. A BMW X3. White. It's in my sister's driveway. Another pause. Your family dynamics are not my area of expertise. What I need from you is a formal affidavit confirming your ownership. Are you willing to provide that? I'll have it notarized by end of business today. The pause this time was longer. Then, you already have the forms ready, don't you? I've had them ready for 8 months, Mr. Chen. I just never expected to need them. He thanked me. Professional, brief. But there was something in the way he said Miss Mitchell before he hung up, a slight shift in tone. The way you adjust your voice when you realize the person on the other end of the phone is not a victim but a technician. I'd heard that shift before. It's what happens when competence registers. I drove to the UPS store on my lunch break and had the affidavit notarized. $12. Took 9 minutes. The notary asked me if I wanted a copy. I told her I wanted 3. Tuesday evening, Maggie called. Rachel, I've been asking around. She said it the way someone says I may have committed a small crime, which with Maggie usually meant she'd been doing surveillance from her kitchen window and cross-referencing it with neighborhood gossip. Asking around about what? About your father and that shop. Because this didn't start last week, honey. This started the minute your grandmother died. She told me what she'd found. 6 months after Grandma's funeral, Gary had gone to the strip mall's management company and asked about selling the lease on Dot's alterations. The property manager turned him down. Not because she suspected anything, because the lease wasn't in Gary's name. It had auto-transferred to me through the will, and only the leaseholder could authorize changes. Gary tried again a year later. Different approach. He called a commercial real estate broker, not my firm, a smaller one in Gastonia, and asked for a valuation. The broker pulled records, saw that Gary wasn't on the title, and declined to list it. 2 attempts. 2 dead ends. Both before I'd filed the quitclaim deed. He's been trying to sell your grandmother's shop for almost 3 years, Maggie said. The only reason he got away with it this time is because Kevin Draper didn't use a lawyer. I was quiet for a moment, doing the math. Not the financial kind. The other kind, the kind where you add up all the conversations you've had with your father over 3 years, and recalculate every just checking in phone call, every "how's the shop doing" question that you thought was casual interest but was actually reconnaissance. Your grandmother knew, Maggie said. She told me once, maybe a year before she passed. She said, Gary's been eyeing that shop since the day I signed the lease. That's why I'm putting Rachel's name on it. She's the only one who'll fight for it. My throat tightened, not from sadness, from the particular ache of being known by someone who's no longer alive to confirm it. She was right, I said. She usually was. Maggie paused. Also, your mother posted on Facebook asking for prayer requests about family drama. 47 comments. I may have replied to one of them. What did you say? I said, maybe pray for honesty first. Maggie, too much? Perfect. Wednesday at work, my boss Janet noticed I was off. Janet Calloway is the kind of woman who manages a commercial real estate team the way a good ER nurse manages a trauma bay, calm, direct, zero tolerance for nonsense. She knocked on my office door at 4:15, sat in the chair across from my desk, and said, You look like someone who's running 2 jobs. What's the other one? I gave her the short version. Parents sold property they didn't own. Proceeds spent on a car. Buyer wants refund. Legal mess. Janet listened without interrupting, which is her superpower. When I finished, she said one thing. Your parents sold a property they didn't own. That's not family drama, Rachel. That's fraud. You didn't create this situation. You just had the paperwork to prove it. She said it the same way she says the comps don't support that asking price as a fact, not an opinion. And something in my chest loosened. Not a lot, just enough to breathe a little easier, because I'd been carrying a question I hadn't spoken out loud. Am I being cruel? Am I punishing my parents over a building? And Janet had answered it without me having to ask. I wasn't being cruel. I was being correct. There's a difference. My parents had just never encountered it before. By Wednesday evening, I had 1 notarized affidavit, 1 furious buyer with a good attorney, 1 72-year-old neighbor who had appointed herself head of intelligence operations, and 2 parents who had run out of voicemails to leave. The ground was shifting under my family's feet. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one losing my balance. Brooke showed up at my apartment on Wednesday evening without calling first. I heard her before I saw her heels on the stairwell, the particular rhythm of someone who's been crying and is trying to walk like they haven't. I opened the door and there she was, 26 years old, mascara smudged, wearing a sweater that cost more than my electric bill. The BMW was parked on the street below, white, clean, still had the temporary tags. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She sat on my couch the way you sit in a waiting room, knees together, hands in her lap, not touching anything, like the furniture might bite. Mom and Dad said Kevin Draper's attorney is threatening to sue them, she said. Her voice was doing that thing it does when she's scared, pitching up at the ends of sentences, turning statements into questions. They said they might have to sell the house, Rachel. The house? They sold something that wasn't theirs, Brooke. What did they think would happen? But it's just a shop. Why can't you just let it go? You don't even USC it. There it was. The echo. Not Mom's words exactly, but the same song. Just a shop. Just an old store. Just a building nobody needs. The family hymn, passed down like a gene nobody asked for. When was the last time you visited Grandma's shop, Brooke? She didn't answer. When was the last time you visited Grandma? The silence between us filled the room the way cold air fills a house when somebody leaves the door open. Not aggressive. Just present. Unavoidable. That's not fair, she said. No. None of this is fair. But fair and legal are different things, and you're driving the evidence. She looked down at the BMW keys in her hand, a white leather keychain with a little silver bee on it, a gift from Tyler, probably. She turned it over once, then again, running her thumb along the edge the way I'd run mine along Grandma's key 2 days earlier. And something moved across her face. Not understanding. Not yet, but the beginning of a question she hadn't thought to ask before. The faintest crack in the glass. She left without finishing her tea. I watched the BMW pull out of the parking spot below my window, brake lights flashing once at the corner before it turned and disappeared. A $42,000 question driving itself home. Thursday night, my father called. Not from the family number, from his own cell. I could tell he'd been drinking, not falling down drunk, but the kind of loose that makes a man think he's being reasonable when he's being loud. There was a television on somewhere behind him, tuned to something with a laugh track, which felt like the universe had a sense of humor even when Gary Mitchell didn't. He started with authority. "I am your father, Rachel. I made a decision for this family. That shop was sitting there rotting. Nobody was using it. I got us $42,000 and you're throwing it away over pride." I didn't raise my voice. I've never found that useful. You got Kevin Draper $42,000, Dad. You got yourself a potential felony charge. And you got Brooke a car she's going to have to give back. Don't you dare talk to me about Grandma left me the shop. Not you. Not Mom. Not Brooke. Me. She left it to me because I was the only one who showed up. And you can't stand that, can you? You can't stand that your mother-in-law loved me more than she loved any of you. Nothing on the other end, just the laugh track, going and going, filling the space where my father's voice should have been. He hung up. I set the phone on my desk, screen down, next to the pincushion. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that shows up after a fight and stays too long, like a guest who doesn't know the party's over. The anger drained out first. It went faster than I expected, and what it left behind was something worse. Not rage, not determination, just grief, old grief. The kind that doesn't arrive fresh but resurfaces, like a stain you thought you'd cleaned showing through a new coat of paint. I wasn't grieving the shop, I wasn't grieving the money. I was grieving the father I never had. The mother who never turned around. The family that was never a family, just a system with roles and expectations. And mine was to absorb and forgive and make it easy for everyone else. I picked up the pincushion, held it in both hands. 4 pins in the top, red fabric, slightly faded. I could almost smell the starch. And for about 45 minutes, I almost gave in. I sat in the dark in my living room and thought about calling Brooke. Thought about calling Mom. Thought about selling the shop myself, splitting the money, handing them the piece they wanted. Letting go, being the good daughter, the easy one. The one who says it's fine when nothing is fine because fighting takes energy and forgiveness takes none, and the path of least resistance is so smooth and so familiar that your feet find it without your brain's permission. 45 minutes. That's how long the old Rachel lasted. Then I remembered something. Not Grandma in the shop, not the ribbon or the butterscotch or the fluorescent lights. Something smaller. Something from the end. 3 days before she died, Grandma Dot was in the hospice bed at the house on Elm Street. She weighed 89 pounds. Her hands were so thin the bones showed through the skin like branches under snow. I was sitting beside her, holding her hand, and she opened her eyes and looked at me. Really looked, the way she always did. The way nobody else ever bothered to, and she said, "Don't you let them take what I gave you. Not the shop. You. Don't let them take you." I put the pincushion back on my desk, lined it up next to the monitor, exactly where it always sits, went to the kitchen, drank a glass of water, brushed my teeth, and when I woke up Friday morning, I was done being the version of Rachel that my family needed me to be. The version that absorbs, the version that smooths things over, the version that keeps the peace at the cost of keeping herself. That Rachel would have called her parents back and apologized for having the audacity to own something. This one had an affidavit, 3 copies, and a very clear understanding of North Carolina property law. Friday afternoon, I met Kevin Draper at a coffee shop on Main Street in Gastonia. Not the kind of coffee shop that has oat milk and Edison bulbs, the kind that has a pot of Folgers and a woman named Darlene who calls everyone sugar regardless of age or gender. David Chen was there too, in a gray suit that looked like it had been through 3 depositions already that week. Kevin Draper was not what I expected. I'd built a picture in my head, some aggressive investor, maybe, or a fast-talking flipper who should have known better. Instead, he was 45, soft-spoken, wearing a polo shirt with his company logo on the chest, Draper Print Solutions. He had the hands of a man who loads his own delivery van. He shook mine and said, "I'm sorry about your grandmother," which was not the opening I'd prepared for. "Thank you. I'm sorry about your $42,000. He almost smiled. "Yeah, me too." We sat down. Darlene brought coffee without being asked, the way small-town waitresses do when they can tell a table is about to have a serious conversation. David Chen laid it out. The sale was void. Rachel Mitchell was the legal owner. Kevin Draper had paid $42,000 for a property that was not Gary Mitchell's to sell. The path forward was straightforward. Kevin would pursue the Mitchells for a full refund, and I would cooperate with any legal proceedings by confirming my ownership. "I want to be clear about something," Kevin said, looking at me and not his attorney. "I'm not angry at you. Your father looked me in the eye at the Rotary Club, shook my hand, and told me that shop was his to sell. I paid cash because he said he didn't want bank complications." He made air quotes with his fingers. I should have known right then. Honest people don't avoid banks. "No," I said, "they don't. I've got a printing business. Business cards, banners, yard signs during election season. I wanted a storefront where people could walk in instead of just ordering online. That strip mall was in my budget. Your father made it seem like a simple transaction. Family property, estate cleanup, everybody on the same page." He paused. "He specifically said you knew about it, that you'd agreed." Something cold moved through my chest. Not surprise I was past surprise with Gary Mitchell. Something more like the final tumblers of a lock clicking into place. My father hadn't just sold the shop, he'd used my name to do it. Told the buyer I'd agreed. Put words in my mouth I'd never said to make the lie feel legitimate. "I did not agree," I said. "I did not know, and I would not have consented." Kevin nodded. "I believe you. I believed your father too, which is how I ended up in this chair." He looked at David Chen. "Send the letter." Chen already had it drafted. I'd seen a preview the day before. Formal demand letter, Palmer and Associates letterhead, addressed to Gary Raymond Mitchell and Constance Ann Mitchell. The key points were: return of $42,000 to Kevin Draper within 30 days. Acknowledgement that the sale was conducted without legal ownership or the consent of the titled owner. And a warning stated in the particular language attorneys use when they want to scare, without threatening that failure to comply could result in civil action and a criminal referral to the Gaston County District Attorney's Office for obtaining property by false pretenses under North Carolina General Statute 14-100, a Class H felony. Up to 25 months in prison. I read it at the table. The coffee was getting cold. Through the window, I could see the street where Grandma used to park her Buick when she came downtown to buy fabric at the old Joann's that closed in 2019. Everything in this town was connected to her. Every street, every parking lot, every strip mall had a thread that led back to Dot Mitchell and her reading glasses and her jar of butterscotch candies. "I want to ask you something," Kevin said, standing to leave. "And you don't have to answer. Go ahead. That shop meant something to you. I could tell the minute I walked in and saw the ribbon on the wall. Third place. Science fair." He paused. "I didn't take it down. I want you to know that. I saw it and I left it there because I thought, whoever put that up loved somebody very much. My throat did a thing I won't describe, because if I describe it, I'll have to feel it again. And I've already felt it enough." I said, "Thank you," and I meant it in about 4 different ways, none of which I had the vocabulary for in that moment. Kevin shook my hand again at the door. "If my kids ever try to sell my garage," he said to David Chen, "you have permission to have me committed." Chen didn't miss a beat. "I'll put it in the retainer." The letter went out Friday afternoon. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. I know what happened next because Brooke told me in a series of texts that arrived Saturday like dispatches from a collapsing government. The first text came at 11:14 a.m. The letter arrived. Dad opened it in the kitchen. Mom was making eggs. He read it out loud. Mom dropped the spatula. 11:20. Dad won't stop pacing. He keeps picking up the letter, putting it down, picking it up. Mom locked herself in the bedroom. 11:31. Tyler and I are at the house. Dad says they don't have $42,000. The car was financed, the 42 was the down payment, taxes, insurance. They can't just return it. It's not that simple. 11:45. Dad just called Kevin Draper to explain man to man. Kevin hung up on him after 90 seconds. Dad threw his phone in the kitchen sink. Mom fished it out with a pair of tongs. I read that last text twice. Tongs. My mother fished my father's phone out of the kitchen sink with a pair of tongs. If someone had written that in a screenplay, I would have called it too much. But life doesn't have a notes department. 12:03. Dad keeps saying she wouldn't actually press charges over and over. Would you? Press charges? I texted back, I'm not pressing anything, Brooke. Kevin Draper's attorney is. I'm just the person who actually owned the shop. 12:15. Dad is sitting in his recliner staring at the wall. He won't talk. Mom came out of the bedroom and said, "This is all your fault," and then went back in. Tyler is making sandwiches because he doesn't know what else to do. Tyler making sandwiches in the middle of a family crisis is the most Tyler thing I've ever heard, and if I'd been in a different mood, I would have laughed. Instead, I just thought that's what people do when everything falls apart and they don't have a role. They make sandwiches. They fill space with bread and mayonnaise because empty hands feel worse than useless ones. Saturday evening, my mother called, not Brooke relaying messages. Connie Mitchell herself. The mask was off. No Bible quotes. No sweetness. No honey. The voice on the other end of the phone was one I'd heard maybe 3 times in my life, the real Connie, the one underneath the Facebook posts and the prayer chains and the casseroles, the one who is not kind, not warm, not maternal, just scared and furious and looking for someone to bleed on. You are destroying this family, Rachel. Your father could go to jail, over a building. Your grandmother is dead. She doesn't care about that shop anymore. You are doing this out of spite because you have always resented your sister, and I am sick of pretending that's not the truth. I let her finish. It took a while. There's a particular rhythm to Connie Mitchell when she's unloading. It builds and builds with no punctuation, like a runaway train that forgot where the stations are. When she stopped, not because she was done, but because she ran out of air, I said, "Grandma left me the shop, Mom. She wrote my name in her will. Not because I resented Brooke. Because I showed up. Every Saturday. For 6 years. While you and Dad were at Brooke's recitals and Brooke's parties and Brooke's everything, I was in that shop. And Grandma saw me. That's all. She saw me. Nothing. And the fact that you just called what I'm doing spite, when all I've done is own what was legally given to me, tells me everything I need to know about how you see me. I'm not the villain here, Mom. I'm the line item you forgot to account for. More nothing. Then, quietly, and this is the part that surprised me, because Connie Mitchell is not a quiet woman. What do you want us to do? There was a time, maybe a week ago, maybe my whole life, when hearing my mother ask, "What do you want us to do?" would have meant everything to me. I would have heard it as an opening, an invitation, proof that I mattered enough to be consulted. I would have rushed to fix it, to smooth it, to make it all okay. But standing in my kitchen on a Saturday night, with the pin cushion on my desk in the other room, and the quitclaim deed in my filing cabinet, and 30 years of evidence that this woman had never once asked me that question when the answer didn't benefit her, I heard what it actually was. It was the same thing it had always been. Fix this for us, Rachel. Make it go away. Be useful. And for the first time in my life, I didn't say yes. I didn't say anything comforting or accommodating or designed to make Connie Mitchell feel better about herself. I said, "Pay Kevin Draper back. Every cent. That's between you and him. The shop is mine. It always was." Then I hung up, not dramatically, not with a slam or a speech. I just pressed the red button and set the phone on the counter and stood there for a minute, listening to the refrigerator hum, a normal sound, the kind of sound a kitchen makes when nobody is yelling in it. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't feel righteous or powerful or any of the things you're supposed to feel when you win an argument you've been losing for 30 years. I felt like someone who'd just finished a very long shift and finally clocked out. 2 weeks later, my parents took out a home equity loan and paid Kevin Draper back every cent. $42,000 wired to David Chen's escrow account on a Tuesday morning. Kevin agreed not to pursue criminal charges. He got his money. He found a different storefront 2 miles down Garrison Road. Better parking, cheaper rent. He sent me a Christmas card that year. I sent one back. Brooke returned the BMW. She couldn't afford the monthly payments without the down payment covering the gap. And Tyler, who, to his credit, had finally stopped making sandwiches and started asking real questions, told her the math didn't work. She was driving Connie's old Honda Accord. a 2014 with a dent in the rear bumper and an air freshener shaped like a pine tree. She didn't complain about it, which was the first sign that something had shifted. Gary hadn't spoken to me since the phone call. Connie sent one text, "I hope you're happy." I didn't reply, not because I was being cold, because I didn't have an answer. Happy wasn't the word. Happy was too small and too simple for whatever it was I'd become. The town knew. Not because I told anyone, because Maggie didn't have to. Small towns run on information the way cars run on gasoline, and the Mitchell family's $42,000 mistake traveled from the strip mall to the church parking lot to the Walmart checkout line in under a week. Maggie told me later that Gary had stopped going to the Rotary Club. "He sits in his recliner," she said. "Your mother brings him coffee, and neither of them says a word." I didn't enjoy hearing that, but I didn't apologize for it either. 2.5 weeks after everything, Brooke drove to Charlotte. No BMW, Honda Accord. She parked on the street below my apartment, and when I opened the door, she looked different. Not the mascara-smudged, panicking girl from the last visit. Calmer. Smaller, somehow. Like someone who'd been carrying a costume her whole life and had just set it down. She sat on my couch, held her tea with both hands, and said something no Mitchell had ever said to me. I didn't know about the Saturdays, about the science award, about any of it. I thought Grandma just liked sewing, and you liked hanging out there. I didn't know you were there because Mom and Dad weren't. I didn't say anything. I let her keep going. Would it have changed anything? If I'd known? She looked at her tea. I don't know. But I should have been told. They used me, Rachel. They used me to hurt you, and I didn't even know I was a weapon. That word weapon landed in the room and stayed there. Because she was right. Every recital they chose over my science fair, every birthday that got the budget mine didn't, every text that said Brooke is so happy, none of it was Brooke's fault. She was 26 years old, and just now learning that the pedestal she'd been standing on was built from her sister's back. I didn't forgive her. Not that day. Forgiveness isn't a light switch, it's a dimmer, and I was still finding the right setting. But I didn't close the door. I poured her another cup of tea. That was enough for now. She looked around my apartment before she left. The bookshelves, the clean counters, the pincushion on my desk next to the monitor. "Your place is really nice," she said. Like, weirdly organized. "That's what happens when nobody rearranges your life without asking." She laughed. It was small and wet and real, and it was the first honest sound I'd heard from my sister in 26 years. Sunday morning. I drove to Gastonia one more time. The strip mall was quiet. Spin City was closed for the day. The nail salon had a new name again, something with a lotus this time. The parking lot was empty except for a pigeon, possibly the same one, still walking like it had somewhere to be. I unlocked the door, lifted and pushed, stepped inside. The shop was still empty. No sewing machines, no cutting table, no butterscotch jar, just concrete and sunlight and the faint ghost of fabric starch that will probably never leave these walls no matter how many years pass or how many tenants come after me. I pulled the science fair ribbon from my jacket pocket. I'd been carrying it since the last visit and set it on the windowsill. Not taped to the wall this time, just resting, like it had found where it was supposed to be. Then I took the pincushion out of my bag. Red fabric, 4 pins, a little faded. I set it next to the ribbon, there in the sunlight where Grandma would have kept it. Not on my desk in Charlotte anymore. Here. Home. I don't know what I'll do with this shop. Maybe reopen it. Maybe sell it on my own terms and put the money towards something Grandma would have liked, a scholarship. Maybe, for a kid whose parents don't come to the award ceremony. Maybe I'll just keep paying the $1,100 a year and drive down on Saturdays, the way I used to. I locked the door, sat in my car, didn't start the engine right away. So let me ask you something. If the people who were supposed to love you only know how to use you, is walking away cruelty? Or is it the first kind thing you've ever done for yourself? I used to think I knew the answer. Now I know the question was wrong. It was never about them. It was always about me. The shop is still there. Garrison Road, Gastonia, North Carolina. Between the laundromat and the nail salon. If you drive by on a Saturday morning, you might see a light on inside. That's just me. Sitting with my grandmother, the way I always have.